Welcome to Pentecost Sunday, which is what today is. We're continuing on with a series called Crisis of Belief, the narrow path that few find and even fewer follow. You can download this book that God anointed me to write for free if you go to our website. In the two previous videos, we talked about some amazing stories which were divine appointments that God set up to lead me into what the gifts of the Spirit are. After the Lord moved me back to Austin, Texas from Montana, the Lord planted me in a homeless ministry that was pastored by Dwayne Severance. It was then that God began to teach me even deeper truths about what it means to be a disciple of Christ. Watch this. On May 15, 2005, it was Pentecost Sunday. Today's Pentecost Sunday. There are no coincidences in the kingdom of heaven that operates on earth. But on that day, Pastor Dwayne announced before the service began that he was going to do something different that Pentecost Sunday. Then he rolled out a red carpet and he took a microphone and put it in the middle of that red carpet on a stand, and he announced to everybody that was there that they were welcome to come up one at a time on that Pentecost Sunday and pray. Suddenly, God spoke to me through a thought impression. He said, I want you to get up on that microphone and speak in tongues. Boy, talk about a crisis of belief. I was going now through a major crisis of belief. Did I really hear God tell me to go do that? And here's what the crisis was. Nobody had ever spoken in tongues on a live microphone at Church Under the Bridge. In fact, I've never heard anybody up until that point in time ever speak in tongues on a microphone at any church or any ministry that I had ever been a part of. I also knew that in the Bible, if we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 28, it says this about orderly worship. No one present, if there's no one present who can interpret tongues, then the person that speaks in tongues must remain silent. So I knew what the Bible said. I'm going through a major crisis of belief because I continued to pray about it, and I heard God speak through thought impressions that He wanted me to get up at the microphone and speak in tongues. Then Pastor Dwayne Severance said we have time for one more person to come forward and pray for our city. At that moment, I took all the courage that I could muster up, and I got up out of my chair, which I didn't want to get up out of. And I walked forward towards that microphone, and I got behind that microphone, and I closed my eyes, and I prayed for God to give me the courage to speak in tongues, and I spoke in tongues, and I just let it fly for what seemed like eternity. I'm not sure how long I was there doing that, but it seemed like a long time. And then when I was done, I opened my eyes, and I looked over to see Pastor Dwayne's face, and it looked like he was in shock. I could tell he was not happy with what I just did. And he came forward, and he stood behind the microphone and said, we need to bring correction to what just happened. I walked over to my chair and sat down, and as I did, Dwayne began to speak. He opened up his Bible, and he began to start to get ready to read 1 Corinthians 14:28. But right when he was getting ready to read it, what it says about orderly worship, all of a sudden a man came over that I've never seen before in my life, and he tapped him on the shoulder. And then he said something into his ear that I couldn't hear, and then Dwayne backed away, and that man came forward to the mic and said, I have the interpretation for what was just spoken in tongues. The man who stepped up to the mic's name is Brian Losey. He got up there and gave this interpretation, which was part of a vision that God was birthing in my life and for the city of Austin to bring together 360 churches in the greater Austin area. And he had shared part of that in the prophetic word that he had given. Afterwards, he came over to where I was sitting, and he reached out his hand and he says, who are you? And he shook my hand and he told me his name, and he says, have you ever been to Glory House? And I said, Glory House? What's Glory House? He says, oh, it's a church that operates in the fivefold ministry and in the gifts of the Spirit. And then Brian said, Well, the Lord has a word that He wants to speak over you through a prophet tonight at the men's meeting at Glory House. That evening, on Pentecost Sunday, God rewarded me for diligently seeking Him by connecting me with Glory House, which at that time was critical to my growth and development and the discipleship of what the Lord was doing in and through my life. That night I met Mark Henderson, who's the pastor of Glory House, and Apostle Jim Milhauser, which is the first person I've ever met that moved in that gift. And I also met for the first time a bunch of different men that moved very accurately in the gifts of prophecy that are talked about in the Bible. And I did get prophesied over. And the last person, though, to speak over me and pray over me was Jim Milhauser. And I'll never forget what happened. He walked in back of me and he put his hands on me and he started to pray for me. And as he was praying for me, I knew instantly that God was rewarding me for diligently seeking Him. And I knew that God was answering my prayer, because the prayer that I had been praying would be at that time that God would put a godly figure, father figure into my life that would teach me what the truth is about how to really interpret all these different scriptures and to make more sense out of what God was doing in my life, because I didn't understand, because up until that point in time, the things that God was exposing me to were different than the churches that I was attending. This story began with me exercising the gift of speaking in tongues. He rewarded me by bringing me into the fivefold ministry to expose me to additional gifts that are in the Bible that He wanted to not only expose me to, but also to bring people around me that could help equip me so that I would be able to operate in additional gifts to serve others, which would also glorify Him. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6 says, "It is impossible without faith to please God. All who want to come to Him." When you read that, all who want to come to Him. You know, Peter wanted to come to Jesus when he saw Him out on the water. He said, "Jesus, is that you? Tell me to come to you." Peter then came to Jesus. He was able to do something that is not recorded anywhere else in the Bible by anybody else. Peter walked on water. But getting back to this scripture verse, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, "It is impossible to please God without faith, and all who want to come to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those of us who diligently seek Him." So what is the spiritual gift that God has entrusted you with? Are you being faithful with that in which He has given you already? The Bible is very clear that if we're faithful with a little bit, that He'll give us a lot more.